All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into something that, honestly, I think you'll find surprisingly interesting. Skål International. Now, you've probably heard the name. Maybe you've even heard it whispered at some industry event, almost like it's some kind of secret society, right? But what do they actually stand for? What's with all the membership rules? We're going to be peeling back the layers of Skål today. And trust me, there are more surprises here than you might expect.
Oh, you are so right about the secret society vibe. It's really easy to just see Skål as this big welcoming group, for anyone and everyone in travel. But dig a little deeper and you see a different picture emerge. One with, some pretty clear lines drawn between different types of professionals. And that in itself, that tells you something about what Skål values, or maybe even more importantly, who they value.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my curiosity here. You're talking about the difference between active and allied members.
Exactly. Now, on the surface, they might sound pretty interchangeable, but that one word difference, it's actually incredibly revealing. So your active members, those are like the movers and shakers, your hotel managers, your tour operators, airline executives, the ones who are actually, calling the shows. Mm-hmm. Now, allied members, on the other hand, they're more like the vital support system. Think marketing agencies, tech providers, consultants. I mean, they're absolutely crucial to the industry success, no doubt. But their influence within Skål's, structure, let's just say it's a different story.
So even though Skål brings everyone together under this big umbrella of travel and tourism, there's a definite hierarchy at play.
I would say so. And look, it's not inherently a good or bad thing, but it is something to be aware of, especially, when you start to think about how Skål might actually shape industry trends or even professional relationships.
That's something I hadn't even considered. Can you give me an example, though? Mm-hmm. How would this active versus allied thing actually play out in the real world?
Okay, so imagine a digital marketer, right? If they work directly for a tourism board, they're considered active. But what if they work for, say, a general marketing agency that just happens to have some travel clients? Well, suddenly they're relegated to allied status. Same skill set, same passion for travel, probably. But their position within Skål, and therefore their potential influence, it's fundamentally different.
Wow. That is such a subtle but significant distinction. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me of those professional organizations where you don't really think about it much. Then you start digging into their bylaws and realize there's this whole hidden world beneath the surface. Speaking of hidden worlds, we stumbled upon something else in our research that I bet most people don't know about. Remember life members?
Ah, yes. The Skål veterans.
Exactly. Yeah. Except, they don't exist anymore. Not since 2006 anyway. Yeah, it seems Skål actually decided to completely phase out life memberships. I can't help but wonder what prompted such a significant change.
That's a great point. It's not every day you see an organization just move away from the whole idea of lifetime membership, right? It really makes you think they made a very conscious decision to evolve, to maybe shift away from a legacy model and embrace fresh perspectives, Yeah,
and it makes you wonder about the discussions that must happen behind the scenes, right? Mm-hmm. Trying to find that balance between honoring their longstanding members while still making sure that the organization stays relevant, relevant for the next generation.
Absolutely. And speaking of the next generation, it's interesting, right? This whole thing ties directly into how Skål approaches its young Skål categories. They're clearly thinking about the future, but even here, things aren't as straightforward as you might think.
It's definitely not just about discounted membership fees for the younger crowd. They've got young Skål student and young Skål professional categories. Each one has its own set of very specific requirements. I mean, they even have an age limit for their student members. You have to be between 18 and 27. Yeah. It makes you wonder if those parameters might unintentionally exclude some really passionate individuals,
And on top of that, we can't overlook the fact that starting in 2024, they're actually implementing a 20% cap on how many young Skål student members they can have. That's a pretty significant restriction, wouldn't you say?
20%, that's certainly a bold move. What are the implications of that? Of, limiting student involvement like that? Are they prioritizing experience over fresh perspectives? Or is it more about ensuring a very specific power dynamic within the organization?
It's definitely a question worth thinking about. On the one hand, you could argue they're trying to protect the value proposition for their more seasoned professionals, right? Making sure that young Skål doesn't become, too dominant. But on the other hand,
could it make Skål less accessible to those who are just starting their careers? The people who might actually benefit the most from the mentorship and networking opportunities.
It's such a delicate balancing act for sure. And it really speaks to a larger question about how Seoul sees its role, in shaping the future of the entire travel industry. Do they see themselves as the guardians of tradition, or are they trying to champion emerging trends and voices?
Now that is an intriguing question. And you know what else really caught my eye while we were looking at their membership categories? The sheer variety of job titles they have listed under corporate affiliation. It's not just your typical travel agent or hotel manager. We're talking about some seriously niche specialties. Medical tourism, wine tourism, even, get this, home-based travel agents.
It's like they're acknowledging, this increasing specialization that we're seeing in the travel industry. They're not just recognizing these niche areas, but it's like they're saying, hey, to really succeed in these areas, you need a very specific set of skills and connections.
Right, you can't just be passionate about travel anymore.
Right.
You need to be an expert in something specific. Take medical tourism as an example. That's a sector that's just exploded recently.
Yeah.
And it requires a deep understanding of, healthcare and travel logistics.
Exactly. And by creating this specific classification for medical tourism, Skål is saying this is a specialized field. It deserves its own space and recognition. And they're doing that for a whole bunch of niche areas, from wine tourism to adventure travel.
It's almost like they're trying to stay one step ahead.
Yeah.
Anticipating what the future of travel is going to look like.
And let's be honest, some of these job titles are pretty fascinating, even for someone like me who's been in the industry a while. I mean, home-based travel agent, that tells you a lot about how technology is changing the way we travel and the way we work.
Totally. It's like the travel world is getting bigger and smaller at the same time.
Yeah.
Bigger in the sense that there are all these new ways to experience the world, but also smaller because technology lets us connect with people from anywhere.
Exactly. And Skål's membership categories, they really reflect that.
Yeah, it's like they're acknowledging the big players while also embracing the disruptors, the ones who are changing things.
Absolutely.
It's an interesting balance for sure. And maybe this is a weird thought, but with all these specialized categories, does it create too much division? Does it really matter if you're a travel agent versus a home-based travel agent?
That's the million-dollar question, right? On the one hand, I can definitely see how all these subcategories might lead to, a bit of fragmentation. Instead of focusing on what unites us as travel professionals, we're emphasizing our differences.
Yeah, right. It's like we're so focused on the individual trees that we can't even see the whole forest anymore. But then again,
maybe these classifications are actually a good thing. Maybe it's about fostering specialization and, real expertise. Think about it. If you're a home-based travel agent, for example, and you're recognized as that within Skål, that might connect you with other people who get it, people who understand the unique challenges and opportunities that come with that. You can share best practices, learn from each other, even advocate for your specific needs within the organization.
It's like they're creating these micro communities within the larger Skål world.
Exactly. It's about finding your people, right?
Yeah.
Connecting with the ones who really get what you do.
And those connections, they can be so valuable, not just for networking, but for actually pushing the whole industry forward.
100%. So yeah, maybe instead of thinking of Skål as one big melting pot, it's more like a tapestry, all these individual threads that come together to make something way more interesting.
I like that. A tapestry. And that tapestry, it really reflects how much travel itself is changing.
Right. It's not just about, seeing the Eiffel Tower or staying in a 5-star hotel anymore. It's about those really personalized experiences, those connections you make along the way.
And it sounds like Skål, with all its rules and categories and everything, it's like they're trying to keep up with those changes.
If not stay ahead of them.
Exactly. Which makes them a pretty fascinating case study, don't you think?
Totally. They're not just reflecting the travel industry, they're actively trying to shape where it goes next.
So what does all this mean for you, the person listening right now?
Well, I think it means that if you're involved in the travel world in any way, whether you're a seasoned travel agent or a travel blogger who's just starting out, Skål International is an organization worth knowing about.
For sure.
Their membership structure, even though it might seem kind of strange at first, it really reveals what they value.
And how they see the future of travel, yeah.
And I think, if nothing else, it reminds us that even in a world that feels increasingly interconnected, there's still real value in specialization.
In finding your niche.
And connecting with those who share your passions.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Skål might not be perfect, but they're definitely trying to bring together all these different voices within travel.
That's what's important. And their story just goes to show that travel, it's about so much more than just checking destinations off a list. It's about the people we meet, the experiences we have, the connections we make.
Well said. Couldn't agree more.
So as you continue on your travel journey, whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, think about Skål, Think about what it means to find your niche, to connect with your people. And ask yourself, does all this specialization ultimately benefit the travel industry, or does it risk creating even more division in a world that sometimes feels, well, pretty fragmented already?
Oh, something to think about.
Absolutely.
Safe travels, everyone.